If you are a neurodiverse professional or entrepreneur, whether that's ADHD, ADHD, OCD, none of these D's, but you know that your brain works differently than most people. And you're struggling because you know your projects have incredible potential. But when it comes time for that final push to complete them, you find yourself doubt or overstimulation, and it causes you to sabotage the very opportunities that you've worked so hard to create. Then you're going to want to stay until the end of this video because I'm going to break down the most important step you are going to need to take in order to resolve this. Welcome back to the Neurodivergent Super Brain series, brought to you by the 25-Hour Day. My name is Colin Response, internationally award-winning recording artist, entrepreneur, and global ambassador for the #1 luxury brand in the world. But most importantly, I did all of this with what most people call ADHD and obsessive compulsive disorder. I disagreed, and so I built a business that's helped now over 150 neurodiverse entrepreneurs and professionals rewire their brains from feeling overwhelmed by a lack of time, energy, or clarity to become masters at executing their ideas profitably and efficiently so that they could add an extra 10 to $20,000 a month to their income while cutting their working hours in half, ultimately so that they could enjoy living a fulfilled and balanced daily life in the process. And today I am blessed to be joined with our guest, Suma. Suma is a neurodivergent, multidisciplinary creative who's currently in Cairo. And today I'm going to show her why she is stuck so that she can be empowered to decide whether or not she wants to permanently remove these barriers from her life today. And like usual, I'm going to do it while walking backwards. So let's bring on our lovely guest, Suma. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm amazing. Thank you for asking. So I have your submission, and we're going to start by just having you read it aloud.
So I've been struggling with completing projects I've started, even though they have so much potential and are basically done. But just the idea of finishing it or moving on to a bigger part of it is so difficult for some reason. I live in constant disbelief that what I'm doing isn't enough, but also feeling overstimulated from juggling too much and find myself sabotaging amazing opportunities.
Thank you for the honesty. I'm sure there's a lot of people who are watching this right now already who resonate with what you shared. So if you are watching this and you have a challenge that you'd like to overcome, I encourage you to type it in the comments below this video because one of you may be invited on for your own episode of the Neurodivergent Super Brain. But for now, we're going to focus on Suma. So the first step we're going to take, Suma, is we're going to clarify the polarity of what you shared during your submission so we can get clarity on the outcome you're truly looking to produce. So the first question I have for you is, when you say that you've been struggling with completing projects, how would you rather feel instead of struggling to complete projects?
Another way to phrase it, you mean?
What we're looking for is the polarity or the opposite. So presently, in the world of struggling, we are unable to access the solutions for what you're looking for until we first shift things into the affirmative. And the reason why is because over here and over here to your brain function exactly the same. Our brain is not looking at whether something is good or bad or big or small. It simply looks at the subject matter itself. So struggling to your brain means no different than doing jumping jacks. It's just focus on the subject matter. So we may personally feel a discomfort with struggling. However, our brain just reads the fact that we're focused on struggling, meaning that, oh, well, if we're focused on this, this must be important information. And if we want to be experiencing something different, then we have to first clarify what is the experience that we need to communicate to our brain is important. Because if we focus on struggling, we will tell our brain struggling is the information that I want you to assign all the emotion to. And therefore, it's going to create retention in your brain because emotion and information is what creates retention in the brain. So the information we have right now is struggling. We don't want to create retention in the brain for that. We want to create retention in the brain for the experience that you would prefer or enjoy. But before we can do that, we actually have to clarify what it is. So the first step is we're going to go through this and discover what the polarity is, meaning the opposite, essentially, for these areas where you're experiencing what you do not want to experience. So we'll start with struggling. And a simple way to look at it is to ask yourself, what is the opposite of struggling to you, Suma?
It's a hard one. Succeeding to not struggle? It would be happily completing projects.
Cool. Now, what I want to demonstrate to you, as I know this is the first time you're going through a process like this, is notice how we went from struggling to succeeding not to struggle to happily completing. And we can tell that struggling is entirely in the place you don't want to be. Succeeding, it's like great, but then you notice that it's still revolving around the struggle, which is kind of essentially another way of saying, I'm just not doing this. And the very important difference between not struggling versus happily is if you think about your own emotional state, your brain has memories of struggling. The memories it has of struggling are connected to emotional states in your own physiology. The same is true with happily doing things. So when you think about struggling to do things and you think about not struggling to do things, I want you to pay attention to how that feels in your body. I want the people watching this to also pay attention to how it feels to struggle and how it feels to not struggle in your body. And you'll notice it feels largely the same, especially when you compare the feeling of that to happily do something. Immediately, your brain starts to think about moments in which you were happy, where you've had happy experiences. And so there's a lighter emotional state. And I say this because your physiology, the way that you're operating in your body, is based on what it has learned from your past experiences and the emotional arousal that has been associated with the circumstance. So if you want to not struggle, but you're saying you want to not struggle, your brain only hears struggle and it can only think about experiences of struggle and it can only tie your circumstance, in this case, completing projects, to the emotional state you are calibrating it to. So you're calibrating it to struggle, whether or not you say not struggle, and the information you're providing is completing projects. So it can only conceive of the emotional state it's familiar with and completing projects because it's an association machine. That's what your brain's doing. It's looking at patterns and it's like, okay, I have completing project, I have struggle. And so how do these two things go together? And so it's looking to find what it deems as a solution to what you're saying, but it's misunderstanding what you actually want to communicate. You're saying, no, no, I want something different. It's saying, oh, struggling and completing projects. She wants these two things together. So how do I find more ways that I can produce this outcome, that I can merge these two things together? Which is why you'll have the experience of a constant struggle to complete projects versus what you shared with me here when you say, I'm happily completing projects. So now your brain is thinking about what are the other experiences I had in which I was happy. It doesn't have to be related to anything to do with completing projects. It could be. It could be times you completed projects and you're happy, but it could just be your birthday party when you were 5 years old. It doesn't actually matter. The thing that matters is that your brain is familiar with that emotional state. And because it's familiar with that emotional state, it can now look at the subject matter you're providing, which is completing projects. And now what it's going to look to do is the same thing. How does happiness, completing projects, how do these go together? How do I find the solution where these two things merge? And it's going to start to look for ways that that happens. So I want to share that with you as the first example as we're going through this, because with that awareness, as we keep going, you're going to start to see the physiological feeling in your body and how it differs from when we were talking about the polarity or the opposite before we even get in to the additional stages. So now that we are happily completing projects, I've started, even though they have so much potential, this would obviously that then be happily completing projects I've started because they have so much potential. Now we're going to move to these things are basically done, but just the idea of finishing them or moving to a bigger part is so difficult for some reason. So I'm going to separate this into two. One is the idea of finishing it is so difficult for some reason. And then we have the idea of moving on to a bigger part of it is so difficult for some reason. So the idea of finishing a project being difficult, how would you prefer to feel? What would be the opposite of it being difficult?
I would like to be excited to finish it so I can see the outcome.
So, how would you rather feel when you think of the idea of moving on to a bigger part of a project?
I'd rather feel comfortable to take on more. I'd like to remove the idea that word altogether because I think I form an idea in my head and so kind of believe it happened or already can see what the outcome is without actually having the actual outcome.
So what I'm understanding is you find yourself in a place where you simply think of the idea, but you're not taking action on the idea. And am I understanding correctly? Okay, cool. So this is great because when you said remove the idea, we're moving into the territory that I mentioned before, which is why you have been unable to remove the idea. Because the sentiment of removing the idea is essentially you're telling your brain, idea, idea, idea. So it just continues to give you even more ideas. But if your problem is not the idea, the problem is that nothing's happening with the idea. We have to understand what is it that I would like to do with my ideas so that that can be clearly articulated and I can start to program my brain to take upon or to produce that result. So if you say didn't have ideas that weren't fulfilled, what would you have? What is it that you want from these ideas?
I want to be working on it, working on completing the task at hand, slowly checking off more off my list.
Cool. So we moved from removing the idea to working on completing the task at hand. So I can move on to the next thing, which are two very completely different things. One is like I remove the idea, and then that doesn't mean that this happens. Maybe that just means you just don't have ideas anymore, or you just have ideas that suck. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many possibilities that can come as a result of not specifying what it is we're looking to produce. So completing the task at hand so I can move on to the next thing now brings us to a greater level of clarity. So now we're moving on to I live in constant disbelief that what I'm doing is enough. So, how would you prefer to feel?
I believe what I'm doing is enough, right? I'm doing what I should be doing.
So, this is great. What we're doing is we're moving through this passageway, getting closer to the result. So, for instance, of course, being in disbelief that what you're doing is enough. Sure. And technically, this is in the affirmative, even though it's disbelief, because belief is the subject matter. But it definitely doesn't really help us that we're talking about disbelief because we don't have clarity over here. So we're going to get to this. But moving from disbelief that what I'm doing is enough to I believe that what I'm doing is enough to I believe that I'm doing what I should be doing is now moving us closer. So the space I want to look at specifically is the word enough, because this is the more nuanced side of things that if we're looking at it, we're like, okay, enough. But what is the opposite of enough? Like when we think of enough, it's just not really the result anybody wants. Oh, I just have enough. Chances are it's probably that if you're in a state doing something happily, you're doing it because you are satisfied or you have more than you need, or that you feel like, it's aligned closer to what you're saying here, feels like what you should be doing. So, to get a little bit clear on the polarity of this, I want to ask you when you say what you should be doing, what does that mean to you?
I think it means I'm kind of going at my own pace and I'm taking what comes to me at the time that it should be rather than rushing to add on more or replace things or have things or sabotage more opportunities. I think I always say this sentence, and I always say what's meant to be yours will come back to you. Well, we all know that, but I don't need to wait for it to come back. I want it to be here and to take advantage of it and make the most of it, and then set it off. I at least can try, and if it doesn't work out or whatever happens, happens. But just to do what I can when I have. Yeah, because it's always like if I don't get something, whatever, if I have an opportunity and they're like, okay, maybe we'll try another time later on because you're obviously not free or whatnot. I'll be like, oh, I'm actually really trying to, but it's okay. I think I convince myself that if it's meant to be mine, it'll come back rather than just finishing it in a timely manner. And setting goals is a big, yeah.
Do you find you set goals often or don't achieve them, or you find you don't set goals?
I think I subconsciously set the goals. I don't set them like I by this month I want to have finished this. And I will do that sometimes. Even when I do that, a lot of things are still on my list. Just keep adding on more.
Which is why you mentioned earlier, so that you can complete the task, move on to the next thing, and check these things off this never ending list. So there's a couple of things we want to get into here. So checking things off the list already presupposes that you have a massive list of things that are incomplete. So the polarity of like having this long list of things you didn't do isn't that you're checking things off your list. It's that you don't have a list, or that you have a list of things that are completed. So when we're looking at this other side of things, this is what allows us to realize, like, oh, this is why and how I'm over here. Because in order for you to say check things off your list, you have to have a massive list. So your brain isn't taking you out of that pattern. It's necessitating that pattern. So we have to establish what the polarity of that is. So finishing things in a timely manner. What is a timely manner to you?
Um, it's like giving yourself a due date.
Okay. Which is similar to setting the goals. So we talked about sabotaging opportunities, and we clarified that instead of sabotaging them, they're here and you take advantage of them and you send them off. Talked about also giving yourself a due date, setting goals, giving yourself a due date, and having a list of things completed. So now when we actually look at I'm doing what I should be doing, now we start to look at something different. What I should be doing is an ambiguous idea, what I should be doing, versus going at my own pace, taking what comes to me at the time that it should be, which is, like you said, instead of just letting it float away, you are taking what comes to you, setting goals, giving yourself a due date, which is this definition of at the time it should be. Then it's here, taking advantage of it, sending it off, which is essentially finishing it in a timely manner, and then having a list of things that are completed. Now, one piece of this that is unclear, which is going at your own pace. And so we need to define what your own pace is.
And going at my own pace is I actually don't really have a specific pace. I mean, my pace is like always rushed, like rushing.
Bingo! And this is where we want to get to. So, Suma, the first thing I want to tell you is this is not the problem, this is the solution. How could it be possible to go at your own pace when you don't have a pace? It can't be, which means that inevitably, if you are going to attempt to go at your own pace, you will constantly fail, right? If I said, hey, Suma, I want you to win this game, but I don't tell you what the game is, can you win the game? No, you cannot. So, in your particular scenario, for you to successfully move at your own pace, we have to first establish what Suma's pace is. And there's no right, there's no wrong, there's just only the truth. Right now, you feel like you're constantly rushing, and you're like, I don't feel like that's my pace. I feel like that's just what I'm doing, which means you haven't been able to say, oh, okay, well, this is what I'm doing, and this is what my pace is. So, how does this differ from my pace, and what changes what I need to make in order to be doing my pace? Like if I put you on a basketball court and I was like, I need you to shoot this thing 5 times, and you shot it 3 times, then it would be clear to you, okay, well, I need to shoot this 2 more times, right? But again, if I just said, I want you to win this game, and I put you on that same basketball court, and I gave you a bunch of balls, but I didn't tell you what the rules were to this, there's nobody else on the court, you couldn't possibly win. So I want you to understand this because this is also contributing to the challenges that you're facing with all the tasks you're also collecting and the disempowering experience you're having where you're feeling like I have all these ideas, I'm not doing them, I'm starting them, I'm not finishing them. They're seeding from things like this. And I will show you why. It's clear to you why you couldn't go at your own pace if you don't know your pace. But here's why this actually matters, Suma. Going at your pace is one of the elements of what you should be doing. If all of these things are the things that you define as what you should be doing, that's cool because you actually were able to clarify a lot of these things. So it's cool. So these aren't necessarily the things standing in your way at this stage. Of course, you need to know how to do them, how to execute them, fine, but that is a different stage. And what tends to happen with most neurodiverse folks is they'll skip a step and they're looking to solve this thing over here, not realizing that they're overlooking the reason why these things are even happening. And so they're trying to solve the symptoms repeatedly and just going in circles. So if we look at this, we can see these are all elements of what Suma should be doing. The final element, or the first element of what Suma should be doing, is going at our own pace. And though we were able to define these, we have not been able to define our own pace, which means we can't successfully go at our own pace. But if going at our own pace is part of what I should be doing, then it's impossible for me to do what I should be doing. And if what I should be doing would give me the feeling of feeling like I've done enough, well, then it would be impossible to do enough, which would cause me to live in a constant state of disbelief that what I'm doing is enough because it never is enough, because I'm never doing what I should be doing, because it would be impossible for me to do whatever I should be doing because I haven't defined what I should be doing. So, right here, we want to look at, well, what is Suma's pace? What is the pace that Suma would like to be moving at? And what that actually looks like for you? So let's clarify that.
Um, my own pace is a fast pace. I'm a patient person, but I like always having things going on, always working on new projects. It's what excites me. So if I can just constantly finish, move on to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, fast, then I can work on a lot of things at the same time.
Now, when you say work on a lot of things at the same time, do you mean literally simultaneously, or do you mean in succession, like constantly, like one thing to the next thing to the next thing to the next thing?
No, like simultaneous. I still work on simultaneous, both.
So going at your own pace is a fast pace because you like to work on new projects. So you want to be able to finish them while doing others simultaneously. So we're starting to chip away at what the pace is. These are reasons why you want the pace, but they aren't really what the pace is. It makes sense. You want to work on new projects, you finish them while doing other things. Okay, kind of. And then it's fast. So what is fast to you?
When I say I'm gonna do something, that's what fast is. What I assign.
I get what you're saying. So you're saying a fast pace for you is you establishing the time and completing it during that time.
Yeah,
So this is interesting, Suma, because when you think about a fast pace, so many people could define this as something different. And I always say there's no right, there's no wrong, there's only the truth. You could say, what's a fast pace? Somebody's like, I finish things in 5 minutes. Or what's a fast pace? I finish things like 60% of the time that it takes the average person to complete it. What's a fast pace? A fast pace is that I only work on projects that in 30-minute bursts. All these things I just described, they're not your definition of a fast pace or mine, frankly. They're just definitions of what a fast pace could mean to someone. So we're learning that your definition of a fast pace is actually fulfilling the commitments that you make to timelines that you decide. That's accurate, right?
yeah,
So, with a clear definition of what pace looks like, I want to show you how this connects to these other aspects. Instead of I'm going at my own pace, I fulfill the commitments that I make based on the timelines that I decide. And, like, say, by setting goals and giving myself those dates, when they're here, I take advantage of them and finish them in a timely manner. So, what's a timely manner? It is the timeline that I establish, and then I have a list of things completed. So, now that we've actually defined what it means to be at a fast pace, we can see that it's like, really, that doesn't have anything to do with speed. It's not a problem. But understanding that actually this has more to do with completion and fulfillment, which means in order for you to achieve what you experience as a fast pace, because it feels like if I say I'm going to do something and I finish by that time, then I can move on to the next thing. So I feel like I'm moving. I don't feel like I'm just with a bunch of things, I'm not doing anything. But really, it's actually more about your ability to fulfill the commitments and the timeframes that you provide. And if you have the ability to fulfill the commitments and the timelines that you provide, you might find that you would still feel like you're moving at a fast pace without taking on so many other things. Because, correct me if this is not accurate, but I know for many neurodiverse folks, the experience that they have is they are taking on all of these things because these things give them the feeling or sensation that they're doing things because they're moving, things are happening. When what they want to be experiencing is things being completed, them having things, things being created, their ideas coming from this ethereal and intangible place to a tangible thing that they can see, use, share, make money from. But it's just in this esoteric land. And so, my question to you, Suma, is which would you rather have? A bunch of things going on, none of which are completed, or if you had less things going on, but all the things that you were going on were in fact completed.
can I have both?
I mean, you can have whatever you want, but that's the question is like which of those is most attractive to you? Do you want to just be in a state where there's so many things going on that you're not actually completing anything? Because what you shared was that that was the problem. But if that's what you want,
Yeah, I would want to complete, like simultaneously be completing things. So as soon as I reach like a tangible, a good place in this field where I have a jewelry brand, for example, and I have paintings where I do exhibitions and stuff. As soon as I can reach a point where I can put them somewhere or be promoting this enough, and I had the proper event or whatever, I can now happily moving on to this one, and that one I can work on a little less. That's how I would want to do it. But I'm still working on all of them at the same time. It's just I prioritize one over the other every time. It's
okay. So you want to be experiencing multiple things simultaneously. but you want to be able to establish clear priorities and know that you'll be able to fulfill these things within your own capacity, but not that you only want to do one thing at a time, but you don't want to have a bunch of multiple things happening and none of those things being completed.
Yeah.
Okay, so then my question is, based on when you give a time frame that you complete something within the time frame, do you think you would be more effective in doing multiple things and meeting multiple time frames if you first establish your ability to do a single thing while meeting the time frame?
I think the single thing.
So I think it's entirely possible. And I don't think, I know it's entirely possible to do multiple things and complete them with multiple timelines. When I look at this, what stands out to me, Sima, is emotionally the solution to the incomplete tasks that are going on has been moving at a fast pace. Naturally, what is a fast pace? Things are coming, like many things are going on. But what we've just clarified is the reason why nothing is getting completed is because you're prioritizing having many things going on above the completion of things. And in order for you to have many things going on that you can complete, well, you have to establish your ability to do the thing you can't presently do because you have no problem having many things going on. The problem you have is completing them. Now, if we look at this idea of feeling overstimulated from juggling too much, what's the opposite of this?
Understimulated?
I mean, that's true. I just don't think that's probably the result you're looking for, where you're just like, I don't feel anything.
Let me just say it like it is. Okay, the opposite of overstimulated would be like relaxed.
Ah, there you go. Relaxed. So what would the opposite of juggling too much be?
Taking care of one thing at a time, or maybe giving each task 100% rather than splitting the percentages.
Mm. So do you mean giving one each task 100% like at a time? Is that what you mean?
Yes, because as I'm working on, I can be working simultaneously, but I might not be giving 100% to each thing. So I would like to give my all, my full potential, my full force into one thing at a time.
Okay, cool. And then finding yourself sabotaging amazing opportunities. So what are you doing instead of sabotaging?
Um, work, working on it, working on achieving these what could come from these opportunities.
Okay. I think we're almost there. But when you think about sabotage, let's look at the word sabotage. Like describe sabotage to me. Like if you're sabotaging something, what are you doing?
I don't know. I'm subconsciously just like holding it off or holding off on it. I'm not accepting it and working on taking the opportunity and doing something with it right away. It's like I think the opportunity is just gonna stay with me and I'll do it when I'm ready. I don't know. It's something. This is the most part that I actually don't understand because like when things come easy, I don't do them.
Okay, so let's look at sabotage in a more like basic and literal form. Not even your like you sabotaging your projects, just the word. Because the word sabotage, like what is it to sabotage something?
I don't know how to say it in English, but I guess um, deflecting the opportunity.
Describe like you can even describe it, even if you don't know the exact words, that's fine.
Seeing an opportunity and like having the opportunity present itself and having the gun pointed at it from the back, like shooting the opportunity in the head. But
Okay,
I'm happy to have that.
gotcha.
I'm presented with something that I want, but I end up being the one that loses it.
So almost like a trap. It's like a planned trap. Is that how you would define a sabotage?
Yeah,
And then the challenge you're facing is you feel like that you're the person who is trapping yourself.
yeah,
Now, if something is a planned trap, I wanted to get to this because I wanted to get to the core of the word. When you say sabotage, it's because it connects to like the idea of a feeling. So if we get to the core of the feeling that's causing you to use the word sabotage, then we can look at what the opposite of that is. Because if we look at the opposite of that, then we can see how that ties to being the opposite of the thing you're trying to resolve. Because if you try to get to it through the way we did first, if it's so far removed, you won't even be able to think about it, right? So we have to take a different route. So the route we're taking is a planned trap, and you feel like you're trapping yourself. So what would be the opposite of having a planned trap?
having a planned scheme or like a way to get out of having like a map.
Interesting. So you're almost there, right? Because you're thinking plan trap. You're like, okay, now I have a plan scheme to like get out of the trap. But that presupposes you're in a trap. Like that's not the opposite. That would be like saying, okay, what's what's the opposite of falling from the sky? And you're like, it would be having a parachute so you're not falling. It's like, no, the opposite would be like jumping from the ground. So what we're talking about right now, being like, okay, I have a planned trap. Oh, I have a planned scheme to get out of the trap. No, 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 no. That's not the opposite. What would be the opposite of a trap?
Freedom.
Freedom. Exactly. That is the opposite of a trap. So that's why we're taking this route, because if we take this route, we can be like, oh wait, freedom. And now we can look to see how does that connect back to the circumstance that we can't even rationally or we can't even intellectually connect with a possible solution there because our brain is not going down that pathway. So I planned freedom. So a plan, I guess you could say a strategy for freedom, but freedom that's planned or present or whatever. And so then instead of you feeling like you're trapping yourself, you feel like you're giving yourself freedom. So find myself sabotaging amazing opportunities. So then we said taking the opportunity, and instead of trap, it's freedom. So with these opportunities, instead of sabotaging them, you feel like you are giving yourself or planning to give yourself amazing opportunities, or even taking those opportunities, making the most of them. Or like if you think about sabotaging, another polarity could be taking advantage of or exploiting in its most literal term, the opportunity. So when you think about that, what words resonate now that we've kind of gone in that direction and opened up this thought of freedom, opportunity, like what the opposite of sabotage really is when you think about finding yourself sabotaging amazing opportunities. What are you doing instead?
Taking these amazing opportunities, not sabotaging them, accepting
Taking them.
them, and
So we want to go one step further because don't get me wrong, taking them is good, but if you think about sabotaging, to say taking them, that
mm,
would be the opposite would be like, just like ignoring them. Like I could take them or I could ignore them. I could sabotage them or I could what to them.
take advantage.
Okay, got you. I find myself taking advantage of amazing opportunities. So here's what we clarified. The one place that was missing was I live in constant disbelief of what I'm doing is enough. And when we looked at that, what we found was constant disbelief of what I'm doing is enough. Well, we started with enough. And so we had to establish what enough was. And after breaking that down, we found, okay, it's fulfilling the commitments that I make based on the timelines that I decide. And you taking advantage of those things, which is what you already say down here. And rather than you being in disbelief, and rather than you even being believing it, you are literally doing it. You are fulfilling it. So fulfilling the commitments that you made and doing enough is fulfilling the commitments you make based on the timelines that you decide. So now there's two things I want to mention. One is the obvious fact that, well, right now they're only simply words of affirmation. Allows you to shift from all these things are wrong and these are all the problems to wait, like these are the actual things that I need. These are the things that would be necessary so that I can orient myself around that solution. But there's one thing I left out intentionally because I wanted you to get clarity before we came to here, which is I'm taking what comes to me. What is the opposite of taking what comes to you?
Giving,
Beautiful. That's actually not what I was thinking, but that is also a very powerful polarity.
giving, giving what I can offer.
Honestly, it's actually better than what I was going to say. And this is the reason why I don't tell you these things and I ask you these things. Because the truth is, taking what comes to you is part of the problem you have been facing. This insurmountable volume of things moving towards you, and you just saying yes, and like, oh, I have all these things going on, and blah, 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 blah. Versus what I was going to say is the difference between taking what comes to you is deciding. You're deciding. I am choosing, but you actually took it a step further than I did, which is exceptional to say that the polarity of taking what comes to you is giving what you can offer. Because presently, you are giving more than you can offer. And that is why that is the experience you are having. And when you shift, I am giving what I can offer by setting goals and fulfilling the commitments that I make based on the timelines I decide. How much more of a difference does that make in terms of you having clarity of, well, wait a second, it's not about taking what is given to you. It's an exchange and you're offering something. So if you're going to offer, you can only offer what you have. You cannot offer what you don't have. And so I want to share this with you because The truth of this is I didn't take you through this for you to be like, cool, I have all these words of affirmation. I took you through this so that you could actually see the difference between the way your brain was calibrated before this and how the actions that you were taking could only lead you to the experience that you were having. There was no other result that could possibly happen. And that's because even if you were going to ask questions around how do I stop taking what I can get? Or how can I stop being overstimulated? That your brain is just overstimulated. That's what it is focused on. But if you go here and you're saying, how can I be relaxed? What ends up happening is your consciousness opens to possibilities, not possibilities of how you could be more overstimulated, possibilities of how you could be more relaxed. Instead of your consciousness opening to seeing, how can I take more of what gets given to me, which is what's causing you to have so many incomplete tasks. Instead, your consciousness opens to, how could I ensure that I'm only giving what I can offer? What steps could I take to ensure that I fulfill the commitments that I make based on the timelines that I just? What could I do to make it as easy as possible for me to fulfill the commitments I make based on the timelines I decide? Natural questions come from that. One of the natural questions is, what are the timelines I decide? Well, in order for you to fulfill the commitments you make based on timelines you decide, you must create timeline, which means that when somebody offers you something, instead of just taking it, you're going to think, if I'm here to give only what I can, well, I would need to know, what is the person asking of, and what would it take from me to give that? And if I want to fulfill the commitments to the timelines I make, I need to see, what timeline would I need to create that would allow me to give this person that thing while still being relaxed? And this goes for everyone watching this. Do you think you're going to produce worse results when you're just trying to get all the things together that, come to you, or through choosing, through deciding, through actually thinking, how do I give only what I can offer? Well, what is it that I can offer? Well, what I can offer depends on what state I'd like to be in. What's the state I'd like to be in? Oh, I would like to be relaxed, taking care of one thing at a time. What timeline would I need to put in place so that the other things I committed to, that I'm able to take advantage of those? Well, maybe then to give what I can offer, it's like I actually can't offer anything to you, because to offer something to you would mean I can no longer take advantage of the opportunities I have right in front of me. This is the potential for you, Suma. At the beginning of this episode, when I said, I'm going to show you the most important step you're going to need to take in order to resolve this, this is it. Because you can't ask the questions that you need to ask to find the solutions from the state and perspective you were in. And most people go from that state to asking questions, and they miss this step in between. And what that means is they're just activating their brain to find more and more and more and more of what they do not want. This is not about the affirmation. So it's great. It's about you being able to look at this and then ask higher quality questions to your brain and your consciousness. All of these questions are only questions that become available to you when we go through the process of first shifting things into the affirmative. The affirmations are cool, but at the end of the day, it comes down to the fact that you can achieve these things once you have clarity on what those things actually are.
It made me realize that I'm in this loop, that if I'm not thinking about the symptoms and just thinking about the problem at hand and how I can solve it, then how am I going to fix any of these problems? Also, the idea that if I keep taking what's coming at me rather than setting timelines and giving everything what it deserves, then I'm not going to move forward. I'm not going to complete tasks. And I think those really help me understand the idea of sabotaging myself.
So if you're watching this right now, I want you to understand there are two pieces of this puzzle. One, you have the mindset side of things. Great. This is what Sumo was talking about. You can see what's possible, and it shifts your perspective. And that's the way you're going to approach things, the perspective and the mindset and the great fluffy things. But that's not necessarily how to do it. And you also have the strategy as to how you actually execute that, how that actually becomes part of your neurology, and how you actually can achieve the things you're looking to achieve. And that's the point of this series, is waking you up to the fact that the thing that you think is standing in your way from achieving that is not what you think it is. This series isn't about showing you every intricate little step. It's about expanding your awareness so that you can see what steps would actually need to be taken to produce the outcome you'd like to, instead of you spending all your time and energy trying to solve the symptoms of the problem instead of the problem itself. So if you're tired of spending thousands of dollars on productivity coaching or therapy, and it's not actually helping you produce the result that you want, then click the link that is in the description of this video, because I've put a link to one of our free masterclasses so that you do have a strategy to execute these things and imprint them into your neurology permanently. Unfortunately, right now, at the time of this recording, our enrollment is full. But if you want to rewire your brain for efficiency so that you can add $20,000 a month to your income, cut your working hours in half, ultimately so that you can enjoy a relaxed and peaceful, fulfilled daily life in the process, then please do yourself the favor and watch the free masterclass, because it is possible for you, or you could not.
So I'm happy you opened my eyes and my mind to the possibilities.
Thank you to our fantastic guest, Suma.
Thank you so much for having me and for helping me.
My pleasure, Suma.